Hello, welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley. And wow, tell you, we got a absolutely fantastic show coming your way today because we got this guest that's going to talk about a few things that we all suffer from. I'm not saying all of us, but I got to say at least 50% of American and a lot of people around the world suffer from some form of insomnia, and I'm one of those myself. And I am looking forward to all the advice and suggestions that this young man is going to talk to us about. And it just got me excited to be talking about this topic because I know many of us want to know as much as we can on how we can get better rest. But before we even start the show and bring on this great and fantastic guest, I got to always introduce my executive producer and co-host who makes everything happen. How you doing, Dr. Michelle Denise Cooley? How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited about this topic today because I think a lot of people know what insomnia is, but do they really know what insomnia is? Do they really understand it? And it's going to be interesting to hear this expert talk about, not only about the natural ways to cure insomnia, but kind of take a step back and see what his organization, his company is doing, and just the different ways to help with this. So I'm definitely excited, and how we can get some people off of things like certain medications they may or may not need. So I'm excited.
I'm excited about this as well. And today I'm in Temecula, California. I know Michelle is in Queens, New York. And I think, I guess, I'm not sure. I think he's coming from Arizona, but we're going to find out a lot more about that real shortly. And if you want to be part of this conversation, all you have to do is go to whichever platform you're watching this on, whether you're watching on E360 TV, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or over 25 other live streaming networks. Won't you join in with the fun just by going to the comments and ask this great guest of ours any question that you like? Michelle, can you please introduce the topic of today's show and the purpose and introduce this great guest that we got on today?
Oh, most definitely. So the topic today is 5 tips for beating insomnia naturally. And we're getting to know sleep researcher Lee Gerdes, and we're going to talk about a lot of things regarding the issue of insomnia. We're also going to discuss the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, and prevention report on insomnia, how insomnia is linked to many health issues, and learn about the brain harmonizing technology to treat insomnia. So let's talk about this guest today. Lee Gerdes. Sleep researcher Lee Gerdes is the founder and CEO of Cereset, a developer of state-of-the-art neurotechnology to improve sleep and well-being. A trauma-induced brain deregulation caused Lee 8 years of agonizing sleeplessness. Utilizing his background in mathematics, physics, software development, theology, and psychology, he was able to develop a simple, painless, non-invasive procedure to end his sleep problems by resetting and harmonizing his brain by listening to his own brain waves. This sounds very interesting. I was more interested also in the fact that he's a background in mathematics and physics and software development. I'm like, wow. So, ladies and gentlemen, the James Cooley Show, It's Your Life presents Lee Gerdes to the show.
How you doing, sir? Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. You know, we got a lot of excited viewers and listeners excited about this topic. So, Ali, if you can you tell our viewers and our listeners where you at, where you grew up from, and just tell them a little bit about yourself.
I'm currently at the Cereset headquarters is in Arizona, in Scottsdale, Arizona, and then I'm more the sort of researcher person, and the company Scholl is the president CFO, but does the business side. But we have 50 offices now open across the United States. We have 4 more opening, and then have about a dozen outside the United States open. And so, these offices all run under a franchise, so that we have an opportunity to build and continue to build. And the reason we continue to build is because, our brain is the most complex single organ of our body. It has more connections than there are cubic meters in the universe. So we're talking about something pretty large. and so when I started this whole process for myself, I was quick to learn that I wasn't anywhere close to as smart as I thought I was, that I couldn't do anything to the brain. I'd tried medications of all kinds. I'd tried therapies of all kinds. I'm Christian, but I even tried shaman. I would try anything. I would do beans in my ear if I thought it would help me sleep, because JC, I really needed it badly, and I knew it. But finally, I started to look at my brain, and I found out that one hemisphere was much more dominant than the other. And then I measured it the same every day, and found out that, over time, sometimes it's less dominant and I'm feeling better. And so my key was, can I get these hemispheres to be harmonious? And then I find, this is like different sections of an orchestra, or different sections on a drum corps, that I used to go to. They have to be in rhythm. They have to be harmonious. And so in order to do that, I used a computer, and then I reflected back to the brain via sound, via earbuds in my ears. I reflected back the harmonious, or the rhythmic section only, not the ones that were non-harmonious, just the harmonious sections. And like two tuning forks, you hit this one and this one happens. That's what I hit. And it took me many, many sessions to fully complete that back in 2000. But now, 23 years later, we're looking at about 5 sessions, usually 4, at about an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow. So you got a very interesting background. Can you tell our viewers and our listeners how, just one moment transform you into the moment, the things that you're doing today, and you're helping so many people out there? But was there a defining moment where you said, I gotta find out a lot more about this so I can get sleep myself and also help others out?
I wish I could say, I wish I could say it was that good or I was that smart, but I was that desperate. I just had to, JC, I had to get out from under this, or I wasn't going to be able to live anymore. I just couldn't do it, because there's a time where you reach the end of your rope, and there's an old saying about, I've reached the end of my rope. Well, you're right. You've reached the end of your rope. So you need some help. And in this case, I had help, I think, from above. And so here I am.
James, you're muted.
Oh,
Doctor, you are muted.
Sorry about that. I said there are millions and millions of people that suffer from insomnia. Can you explain to our viewers and our listeners exactly what the definition of insomnia is?
Well, if we go backwards and say we don't have insomnia, what we have instead is restful sleep. And so when we wake up in the morning and we feel energized and rested and pretty clear-headed, that's good. That's what we're shooting for. That's our target. That's our direction. But when sleep duration is less than, say, 6.5 hours, or when we have real difficulty falling asleep either at the beginning of the night or in the middle of the night, when we have difficulty staying asleep. So let's say the least noise, the rain starts to fall even lightly, and we hear it and it wakes us, then we're not into a deep sleep. And so these things are indicative of the fact that our brain isn't able to fully relax. And when it's not able to fully relax, it can't clear itself. You know, when you reboot a computer, you have to reboot a computer sometimes, you know? And the reason you do is so that its pieces can get integrated again, and so they can be cleared to be filled. And it's the same way with the brain. So when we don't get good sleep, then we're not optimally performing. We're not at our best. Our thought process isn't as good as it could be. Our memory isn't as good as it could be. And our instinct to be active and engaged isn't nearly as good as it could be. So we're underperforming. And so when I was 3 years old, if somebody said, "Hi, Lee, do you want to be underperforming in your life?" I would, "Oh yeah, I really," I wouldn't have said that. No, I've got this stick horse and I'm riding it. Now leave me alone because I'm going to be a cowboy or something. I was all about that at that age. And then all at once, life happens. And sometimes it's not pretty. And when it is that way, our brain works to compensate for us, so that we can continue going forward. But when it does that and gets stuck, then it can't rest itself. It's lost sort of trust in the environment and the world.
Wow. So that's a whole lot to talk about. I want to pick it up we're going to take a station break right now. But we're going to come back. We're going to pick it up, and we're going to also discuss how you can tell the difference between insomnia, or if a person is suffering from some other sleep disorder. So if you want to be part of the conversation, just go to whatever you're watching this on and just ask any question you like. It's your life. I'm Dr. James J.C. Cooley. We'll be back shortly after this.
I never wanna leave. Yeah, I'm right where I wanna be. We got something you and me, and I can't get rid of this feeling. Just like a magnet, we're just like a magnet. The things we have can be taken for granted. Now I know that it has always been you. I can't help it, I'm so drawn to you. Just like a magnet, we're just like a magnet. The things we have can be taken for granted. Now I know that it has always been you. I can't help it, I'm so drawn to you. Hey, I'm so drawn to you. I'm so drawn to you. Yeah, yeah.
Noah Dingley here, producer of The James Cooley Show, It's Your Life. And the new audio version of James' book, Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet, is a must-have. James shares his true life story of struggle and success in America. It's both a cautionary tale and a roadmap to achieving the American dream. Get the new audio version of Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet by James Cooley on Amazon.com or wherever audiobooks are sold.
Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I tell you, we got a fascinating topic and an absolute wonderful guest that's talking about and discussing some of the issues and concerns with insomnia. And I tell you, just like we talked about earlier, we know that there are millions and millions of people, not just in the United States, but around the world, that are suffering from this problem. And I see that we got a lot of people around the world watching this show right now. But if you want to be part of the conversation, whatever you mechanism you're watching from, you can go on and ask any questions that you like. Hey Lee, how could a person tell the difference, or is there a way to tell the difference between whether you got insomnia or you're suffering from another sleep disorder, so another type of issue?
Well, the big type of issue uh, that causes the lack of restful sleep is sleep apnea. And that's a condition that might be caused, medically in the respiratory system in some way. And so you don't really, but that condition can also be caused by the brain. So you don't know about that particular issue. If you snore and then if you wake up, and gasping for breath, that's a basic sign of sleep apnea. And so that doesn't mean that person doesn't have insomnia. They do, but it could be caused by a physical problem, either something in the respiratory system that's not functioning properly is the general cause. But it may also be caused by the brain. When we're thinking about us as human beings, and let's say we're thinking about inviting us as humans to dream and then to function, to work out that dream in the world. Well, that means that we're capable of having a creative dream. And that means that the two sides of the brain are relatively harmonious, specifically in the areas of what's called the autonomic system, where the two sides of the brain that drive the internal nervous system that goes through the body and connects to all of our organs. And as that system does it, one side is the brake, and one side's the brake, and the other side's the gas. It's just the same like the car. The left is the brake, the right's the gas, just like a car. And in a car, it goes, you brake and then you push the gas, and then you brake and next stops and so on. Well, the brain does the same thing for us. We start up and then we sit and rest or whatever, and then we stop and then we start. And so our brains need to be very flexible. They need to be able to move to the left or the right. But when there's some kind of trauma, then often our brains get stuck. On one side could be the left side, which is the brake, and we get into what's called a freeze response. So the blood flows away from our extremities, our heart rates go down, and our respiration becomes more shallow. Or it could be the right side, which is the gas. We get stuck in fight or flight, which means we're pushing and we're really on. And I think Dr. Michelle talked about that earlier. When we're people who are highly motivated, well, that's a great thing on the one hand. And on the other hand, we can get stuck in that too. My mother, I said, Mom, that chocolate cake is just too good. I got to have another piece. She said, anything, even though it's good, could be too much. You need a balance, son. And she taught me a lot of things, but some of which I even learned, JC. It's a miracle. But the fact is, our brains have to work that way. And when they're stuck on either side, we do not get good sleep. Now, if they're stuck on the left side, not only don't we get good sleep, but we may relax too much, too deeply in different areas and shut up our own air. And that's part of a sleep apnea pattern. And so it just depends what we have going on, but insomnia is pretty much insomnia. it's a detriment to our well-being and to our optimum performance.
Wow. So insomnia is linked to a long list of physical and mental disorders. Can you identify some of the things that is caused mentally and physically by the lack of sleep?
Well, first and foremost, there's, brain fog and the lack of cognitive function. You probably know this, but 70 to 80%, and the CDC suggests it's close to 80% of our high schoolers in the United States now have insomnia. That is, that's frightening. And it is tied in directly to the fact that our high school statistical scores for high school tests, for a number of different high school tests, are lower than they've ever been in history. And I'm sure there's a direct correlation there between their ability to get good sleep and their ability to think and remember and perform. So that mental cognitive performance in general is highly lessened when we don't get good sleep. Number two, at a much deeper level than that, but a much more serious one, is that when we don't get good sleep, we're much more highly likely to have Alzheimer's or dementia as we age. And it's maybe one of the at least the calling cards or the indicators that we find that now some people have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia in their 20s. How in the world did that happen? I mean, by the way, thank you for calling me a young man. When that was really nice. I wrote that down. Remember, JC calling me a young man. But the fact is, as we age, our brains do shrink. We learned a lot about that in COVID, by the way, and I could go into that. That's another hour probably. But when they shrink as we age, you think of older people being less likely to be able to sleep because their traumatic experiences through their life might come up to cause more of a differential between the left and the right hemispheres because they don't have the flexibility anymore. So as the young people do. But now we're talking about 80% almost of all high school students in the country. It blows my mind what an epidemic we're facing regarding sleep, right? And so Alzheimer's, dementia, and the likelihood of it is much greater when we have insomnia. It's long periods of time. And trust me, I'm not talking about getting sleep by adding a drug, a sleep drug or marijuana or alcohol or any other drug. That's not sleep, really. That's not restful sleep. You wake up, even though you wake up and you're kind of dazed and you have to come out of that. You don't get the same kind of opportunity for clearing your brain as you do when you get into deep REM and the brain does its own cleaning. So we're compromised when it comes to cognitive performance and in general. But not only are we compromised in cognitive performance, and you already knew this, I guess, but you said it when you just mentioned the question, was our bodies are also compromised, which means that we're much more vulnerable to get diseases. Our whole artillery, if you will, that's there to fight diseases, our immune system is compromised when we don't get restful sleep. So you're looking at every single aspect of your life, every one. And that means that you cannot, I'll speak for myself. I cannot offer myself in a relationship in any way nearly as well when I'm fully there and present as I can, if I have sleep issues, I can't do that. So there's always relationship strains too. And that's quality of life in every single way that you can imagine. Sleep is absolutely key.
Wow, you mentioned sleep, and I noticed earlier when we was on, you mentioned 6 hours of sleep. What is the recommended amount of sleep that a person should get? And is it possible that even if you get the recommended amount of sleep, that you can still wake up tired and still have some form of insomnia?
Yeah, I think it is possible that even if you're sort of unconscious for that time, doesn't mean you wake rested and ready to go. And so your sleep wasn't very well done. But when we're talking about time, if we're looking at, say, 7 to 8 hours as a natural window, some people are different. And it doesn't matter about our gender, race. It doesn't matter. We're different. And some of us can do quite well on a little bit more than their 6 hours or a little bit more. Some of us need 8.5. And I find myself in some periods of time to need more sleep than I do in other periods of time. And I've pretty much, though not totally, but N equals 1, me, I think as I've looked at it, that's due to the amount of stress I have. So I think as my stress goes up, my need for sleep is greater in order to clear that, But I think when we're looking at generally 7 to 8 hours is what we're looking at for a good sleep window. And in order to get that, we have to have, first we have to pay attention. If we're having trouble sleeping, we have to pay attention to our environment. It needs to be darkened so that our circadian rhythm can be set right. So that's number one. And number two, we have to watch how we're programming in that space, in that environment, how we're programming our own brain. For instance, if we get in bed and start working on a laptop or phone and that kind of thing, or even watching TV, if that's our MO, method of operation, then we're programming our brain to be active when we go to bed. We should have a darkened, comfortable environment for sleep and for intimacy, and that's it. We shouldn't have any electronics in the bedroom, basically, at all. And therefore we start programming or training our own brain. Okay, brain, come on, my friend, we're going to sleep here. This is the environment, and you and I are going to do this. So when we get in there, that's all good. But the other part is that once we get the environment, if we still can't get to sleep, the one of the worst things we can do is say, I'm tough. I'll get to sleep. I'll close my eyes and I'll stop breathing if I have to, but I'm going to sleep. Well, guess what? That isn't true. We have to be in a relaxed state. Our brains have to be well rested and receptive to that state. And when we're not, if we lay in bed awake, we're becoming actually more and more tense. We're not doing ourselves any favor because we're breaking down our programming for the brain to sleep in that environment, A, and B, we're just increasing our anxiety. So
I want you to hold that. I want you to hold that thought because we're going to take a station break, but I want to come back and pick it up where we talk about the environment, and you're absolutely right. So I want to pick it up with that and continue to name the steps, and also go into some recommendations on how a person could reprogram their mind so that they are able to sleep. And if you want to be part of this conversation, all you have to do is go to the comments and ask any question you like. We'll be back shortly after the break. Is Your Life on Dr. James J.C. Cooley.
Really get a chance to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you truly know who you are, love who you are. Love who you are. You're a masterpiece. Love who you are. Love who you were born to be. Love on me. That's what I'm talking about. When you leave high school, you gotta know today or tomorrow, hopefully today, what your plans are. Hopefully, there is no bad decision unless there is no plan. Create, collaborate, commit with confidence. Commit with what? Commit with what? In everything that you do.
Welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I tell you, I'm learning a whole lot as relate to insomnia because I do have it, and not ashamed to say that, and sleep apnea and all of that, but always looking for ways to kind of get better sleep and get an understanding of reprogramming my mind so I can get the 7 to 8 hours sleep that Lee is recommending. Me personally, I say maybe 4 or 5 is max of what I've been getting for the last 30-something years. But I'm open-minded, and so should you be open-minded so we can get better sleep. So, I want to pick it back up again because one of the things that you were saying was the right environment, programming your mind, kind of pushing away a lot of things like focusing on television or on the computer. Can you pick it up with that?
So the environment, as you said, darkened, restful, and only purposeful for two things: sleep and intimacy, and that's it in terms of the environment. And then once we have the environment set, and that's the beginning of when we go in that environment, that our program, our brain is naturally going to start moving towards sleep. And that's a beautiful thing because that's what it does. And then secondly, we can't let ourselves get caught up in any kind of, rumination of, oh, I've got to sleep now. And so we get more and more nervous. We can't go to sleep in 20 minutes or so we need to get up out of bed. We need to go somewhere else. And then we need to do something relaxing. So those are the kind of the first two things. A third thing would be, I have laughed a lot thinking, somebody where did the term nightcap ever come from? You know what I mean? I mean, when you think about that, alcohol is the worst thing for sleep you can do. So how in the world is anybody thinking nightcap is good? I don't know.
That's a good one. Hey, Lee, can you tell us about your company, C Reset, and tell us about some of the services and I know you said you guys got over 50 locations. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit.
First of all, one of the first clinical trials we did was in fact the clinical trial for insomnia. And I met a neurologist who led a research team at the Wake Forest School of Medicine back in, I think it was 2008 or 9. And he had a daughter who had migraines, and we talked on the phone because he saw some of the research data that I reported on from the University of Arizona. And he said, well, how did you get this spectrograph? And I was explaining to him, how we had to develop our own hardware. We had to develop our own software. Because the world just wasn't keeping up with us. So we put together a team of experts and we did that. And we do it today, by the way. We're looking at the brain at 500 samples a second, and we're looking at each sample at 48,000 frequencies. So, and at multiple places on the brain at the same time. So you can imagine that's a lot of data for the computer to handle, but it does, no problem. So I'm glad something can, because I couldn't. And the fact is, though, that the first study we did was a study for insomnia. And as we did that, I think we got over a 96% effect rate for the test group. The control group was as usual. And then some of the doctors were saying, well, what you've developed is actually just a very fanciful and effective placebo. And so I wondered about that. And I thought, what if they're true? What if that's true? Because I started using it for myself, and placebos, we know, work for a time. What if that's true? So I figured that out by actually trying it with some horses. I worked with my daughter, and we set up work with equine. You had a horse who had a major issue, and we would hook that horse up with our technology and let it listen to its own brain. And because, horses, you can't tell them, hey, I'm going to fix your problem. They don't believe you. They're going to kick you, but they're not going to believe you. So we used equine, and it was major success. And then from there, I knew we were onto something. And in that study too, we then took the people that were in the control group, we took them over to the test group. We went through our Cereset technology, a legacy technology with them, and they were equally successful as the test group. And so we were off to the races. Now we have 11 clinical trials done, finished, completed, and reported on. We have 4 more to be completed and in process now. But 4 of those 14 will be only on sleep, and almost all of them will involve insomnia as one of the markers for whatever problem that was being studied. Post-traumatic stress, concussion, and mild traumatic brain injury, postural orthostatic tachycardia when somebody's autonomic system gets off, hot flashes for postmenopausal women, PTSD, both in the military and for civilians, and migraines, as well as the insomnia studies were some of the things that we've tackled in clinical trials so far. And sleep is major. It's key to everything.
Wow. So you mentioned the word brain harmonize. What exactly does that mean?
The brain harmony?
Yes.
Well, you have in an orchestra, you have a number of instruments, and they may be playing different notes, but they're also, those notes harmonize. They fit together. So when those notes are based on frequency, a sound is just energy, it's movement. That's why you can plunk a guitar string and get a note, right? And then you can move it up and down, make the string shorter or longer, and then pick it again, and then you get a different note. And so our brains work similarly in terms of frequencies. And we can measure those frequencies. So when those frequencies match up well, we know that they harmonize. And we only take, the middle range of harmonious frequencies, and those we just dominate back to the person. So the person hears a sound. The sound isn't actually music; it's actually an engineered tone, but they hear it as a tone, like a note, and musical note. And the brain then soon knows that it's generating those tones, because those tones, when the brain moves up and down in dominance, the tone moves up and down at exactly the same level relatively. And it sounds maybe complex, but it's really not that complex. Well, I guess it is, but it's mathematically complex, but it's not truly complex. And so it's the tones that cause the brain then to move its upper and lower self back to that harmonious area. And there's a lot more energy playing in there. And the instruments that are out of tune are just gone.
Yeah. So how many are these sets? And I mean, would you say would be, I wouldn't say require, for a person to actually start getting benefits, and resting better and overcoming something?
There's generally about 5 sessions in our wellness package to get going. But in the beginning, there's sort of an introduction we do to Saraset. And what we do is we look at the emotional center and we look at the autonomic center. And it only takes about 20 minutes to do that. And then we show that to our clients. And we say, oh, it seems like a brain like this might be doing this emotionally. And in other words, they may be judging others outwardly more than they judge themselves, or they may be more in a fight or flight than a freeze. And here's what they might experience. And we have a lot of clients who say, have you been reading my mail? So, because we can see that. And then we get a chance, and the client does too, is to see their brain as they start doing sessions. And then they get an opportunity down the road to see, here's where you started. Even better than we want.
Wow. So that sounds intriguing. And I think you're still there. Can you hear me? It seemed like I had lost you for a second. We're going to take a station break, but we're going to come back and we're going to pick it up because this is interesting. And we're going to learn about these 5 tips that Leah's going to discuss with us. So hang in there. Come. I hope you're taking all this in. We'll be back shortly after the break. Welcome back to the James Cooley Show. I tell you, just so much information to learn in an hour. but we taking it all in, and I'm curious to find out about these 5 tips that is going to enable us to be able to understand ourselves mentally, refocus, so we can start getting better sleep. And I tell you, you want to be part of this conversation with this great guest of mine, just go to the comments, just ask any question you like, and I promise you I'll get it on the screen. We'll get you an answer. Lee, we talked about briefly 5 tips we can do to beat or overcome some of the aspects of insomnia naturally. Can you talk about those, please?
Well, what we've discussed are how important the environment is. First of all, darkened and meant for sleep only and intimacy. Secondly, that we don't want that environment to be engaged in doing other things like working on computers and electronics. And then we don't want, if we can't go to sleep, we don't want to be laying there for a period of time longer than 20 minutes. We want to get up and do something relaxing so we can sleep. We don't want to drink alcohol. Nightcap is a misnomer or an advertisement from the alcohol industry. I don't know which, but because it doesn't help us sleep at all. It doesn't achieve restful sleep. And then we want to maintain a sleep schedule. We want to go to bed and wake at approximately the same time, within an hour or 2 hours each night. If we do that, we can know that we've done our part in attaining restful sleep. But if we don't attain it, then we also need to understand and realize that there might be other things involved. It might be physical, but that's only about a very small percentage of the time, certainly under 5%. But generally, it's a traumatic experience, and our brain's stuck. It's stuck more in a fight or flight position, or it's stuck more in a freeze response. And when it's stuck in either side, then we can't sleep well. If I may, I'll just explain a little bit about those 2 conditions. A fight or flight condition, let's say we're working with 2 guys that, went to boot camp together. They liked each other. They played football together, North Carolina. They went to boot camp together. They went to Afghanistan. They had 3 tours. And on the 3rd tour, they're walking down the road, one on each side, and an IED goes off on the other side, and his partner is blown up, and he rushes over to help him, but it's too late, and the explosion was too great, and yet he's starting to take fire. So what happens to the brain is it numbs him. It goes into a freeze response. And it numbs him so that he can defend himself and stay alive, which he did. And so, but when he came back, he was in a huge freeze response, and he had post-traumatic stress. And when we found him it was in a clinical trial actually, and then his brain balanced, he could clearly understand what happened. That's why my hands and feet have been cold a lot since that's why I get dizzy sometimes when I stand up quickly. Yes, your brain is shutting things down. It shut things down when you were overcome with emotion and trauma in Afghanistan, and it kept you alive. And so now it's saying what? We're shutting you down to keep you alive because evidently you need that from us. And so our brains can't really see our environment, and they don't think beyond the impressions or the input that they have. So here he was in a freeze response. Now, another person from Afghanistan in the same study was a person who was a soldier, and he would kick in doors and take out the bad guy. He would check in the rooms, and there would be gunfire, and he was on all the time. So you can imagine pupils would dilate. He was ready to go. He was set. And in doing that, he got stuck in fight or flight. So the blood rushed to his extremities. And when he got home, he was too quick to respond. And his emotional response was much greater than would be needed because he was so already amped up, we would call it, And so those are the two conditions. Both of them suffered from insomnia dramatically. And both of those conditions of insomnia were cleared. So when you have someone that goes through these steps to take care of themselves in the environment, in getting to bed at a reasonable time, and not in putting alcohol and other drugs and medications, and in not laying awake getting frustrated. If you have somebody that does those things pretty well, and in terms of their own personal behavior, and can't get to sleep, it's highly likely that they're going to be stuck on one side of their one side of their autonomic system or the other. And Cereset is a perfect way for them to balance that autonomic system and do it very quickly, relatively, and more importantly, very non-invasively.
Wow. So you spoke a lot in that one, but what about people that have been using over-the-counter medicine for sleep, Ambien, NyQuil, ZQuil? What would you tell them?
I'm not a doctor, I'm an engineer. But I would tell them to look at the clinical studies and know what they're doing in terms of the likelihood of their future, because they will be highly likely to have dementia, Alzheimer's, and other brain-related issues.
Where can I know you guys got plenty of locations. How can if someone wanted to seek clinical studies from you guys' organization, how would they go about finding out the locations? If it were one in the state or city that they are in, is there a number that they can call?
Yeah, if they go to the website of Cereset, it's CE and then reset, RESET.com. They can go to find our providers, and there's a map, and they can find out which is closest to them. Also, the HQ, the headquarters number is on there, and there would be likely somebody there that would help them as well.
Okay, so we're down to the last couple of minutes of the show. What are 3 takeaways that you want our viewers and listeners to get from this great discussion that we had?
We have to understand that it's not our fault. We really do. When we do the best we can to be the best people we can, but we can't be, it's not our fault. Our brain gets stuck, and we can get help for that. Secondly, we have to understand that when our brain's not stuck and it's flexible, we have more power, more opportunity, more thought-provoking capability than we ever thought possible in our life. I would never, ever have believed that as a poor kid, dirt poor from Nebraska, I would ever be talking to you about brain and neuromodulation. For crying out loud, JC, and gnashing of teeth. I don't see how I could do this. But he does. And I'll go with that. But that little 3-pound mass between our ears can direct us to things way beyond what we ever thought possible. And thirdly, the only reason it's good is because we help make it that way by reaching out to help others. That's it.
Well, Lee, this has been an absolutely wonderful discussion. I would love to have you back on again one day if you have time.
Absolutely.
We can pick up and talk some more about this. So, but I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come on the James Cooley Show. It's your life. I'd like to thank my executive producer and co-host, Dr. Michelle Cooley, for putting together another spectacular show. I must always thank our viewers and listeners for tuning into the James Cooley Show every day. And I tell you what, always, always, always dream big, think big, and be big, and take lead advice so we can get better sleep. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. It's your life. I'm Dr. James J.C.